Hi, everyone. Good afternoon. Thanks so much again for being here with us today. I'm Laura Yunkin. I'm an LA-based entertainment producer, and I'm also the curator of today's summit with my partner, Christy Johnson from Artemis Connection. So if you love the summit today, please let us know. And if you didn't, please don't let us know. I'm just kidding. But we've spent months and months planning today for you, and I really hope that you've enjoyed the programming that we've put together. We've still got lots more to do this afternoon, so I hope you'll stick around with us. This is the panel today where we're going to talk about the M word, the dreaded M word, millennials. We're going to talk about age and intergenerational dynamics in the workplace. So I want to welcome first my amazing panel. So let's welcome Patty Murray back to the stage.
Who is not a millennial, by the way. I thought the M word was mature.
No, could be. This is Haley Hoffman-Smith, Jonathan Gagliardoni, and Rocky Voria, and I just want to welcome them to the stage. You can look them up and all of their amazing accomplishments on LinkedIn or elsewhere. I just kind of want to dive in and let's chat, shall we? So I would love to know, have you been a part of a successful intergenerational team? And what did that look like? What did that feel like? How did your team work? Anybody want to jump in?
Yeah, I'll go for it. So this last summer, I worked in Italy for a wine conglomerate with a consulting group. And we all had various ages and backgrounds of different arrays of experiences, and I was the youngest. But I think what really worked with the group is that all of our ideas were welcome. We utilized the yes, but approach. So when we shared an idea, instead of saying, no, that's wrong, we'd say, yes, I like that idea, but here's a different way to look at it. So it made it more comfortable to share my ideas, considering that I was a little bit anxious about being the youngest and the one with the least amount of experience. And I think that helps everyone else as well.
Cool. Great answer. Patty, what about you?
We actually started a program. I only remembered this very minute. We called it reverse mentoring. And it was basically bringing the youngest people up to the executive teams and having them mentor the executives. So we heard of the young voices, the young opinions. And it was really a powerful experience for us because when you get to the executive level, you're surrounded by too many people who are like you. So we had to do a variety of things to kind of mix it up. And it was a wonderful experience. I think it was as well for the younger people, but it was a very pointed project so that we could hear from people who might have been afraid or might never have crossed our paths.
Fantastic. Rocky, what about you?
Yes, I have definitely been part of a successful intergenerational workforce. I currently am today, actually. So I'm in the inside sales team at Microsoft. It's an exciting part of the business because it's actually a relatively new part of the company. We are only 2 years old. And when I started, I was one of the first employees. And now we have 1,800 people globally, and half of them are millennials straight out of school. And half of them are on the other end of the spectrum with a lot of experience. And I think Steve Bucciarati said it really well earlier when he used his 3 words, leverage collective genius. And it's all about how do you find ways to really foster that, because the different generations need to be motivated differently. They collaborate differently. And, even if we look at certain things like social media, we have some internal social media collaboration tools, and we see our younger folks leveraging them more and some of our older folks not. And so we need to be really thoughtful about how are we actually providing the right mechanisms to collaborate. And I guess another example for me is just sort of my own personal relationship with my manager. She is a corporate vice president at Microsoft. She's been in the IT industry for 35 years, has worked at pretty much every company in the industry, and I've only been at Microsoft for 6 years. And I actually think that's why she hired me, frankly. I think that I offer a different and unique perspective compared to all of the people around her, kind of like what Patty was saying around just sort of reverse mentoring. And I think there's a place for everyone, and it can certainly work.
Just to jump in a little bit, we did a similar thing as well. Rocky currently is the chief of staff to the corporate vice president, and we did a similar thing. We would pick our best up and coming, but lower level in the organization people to be our chiefs of staff so that it could be an intergenerational learning.
I too have found that to be a fantastic experience. I was at Disney Imagineering for about 5 years and got to partake in a mentoring program there as well. And one year I was paired with the CFO. He was brand new to the organization. I actually had been there a little bit longer than him. And so we both learned so much from each other. And it was just a fantastic kind of sharing process where it wasn't about, the mentor only teaching and me only receiving. We were able to work together and we both found it really valuable. So what's interesting about the work...
Can I jump in?
Yeah, of course.
I figure I need a turn. No, I'm just kidding. So I've been in startups for the greater part of 10 years. A few of those I've started. And for me, that's probably one of the most interesting ways to have a successful intergenerational relationship, because in a startup, you don't care how old, what they look like, anything. You just care that they have the ability, the drive, and the desire to make something be successful. And for me, it's been super interesting, especially in my last startup, which was a blockchain startup. And you might think, hey, well, blockchain is this really new technology. Well, there's actually quite a few people on the team that are of an older generation, but have tons of experience in the .com era with working with SEC, with working these things that frankly, someone at a younger age won't have. So but on the opposite end is that we had some millennials on the team that are just very inundated in that new information. So it's a perfect meld of age groups, I guess.
That's fantastic. So actually this year, Haley just graduated from college this weekend, by the way. Congratulations, Haley.
Thank you.
And what's cool about this year is that it's actually the last year of millennials graduating from college. So most of your millennials are actually pushing 35. They're aging millennials, that's the technical term. And what's interesting about the workforce right now is that for the first time in a long time, there's actually 4 generations in the workforce: baby boomers, Generation X, millennials, which are now the largest group, and quickly behind us, Generation Z, and they're a whole different can of worms. They're fantastic. But that's really different. Technology has impacted the way we work, the way we collaborate, the way we live our lives more in the last 10 and 20 years than ever. And that has really impacted the way we collaborate with one another at work and the expectations on our output, on our products, and all of those types of things. So I've met with lots of companies. I also run an organization called The Brave Millennial, which is a platform for millennial women to connect about their careers and upward mobility. And I've met with a lot of companies over the last few years, and everywhere I go, it doesn't matter if it's a startup or a big organization, everyone tells me that, yeah, they have intergenerational tension. And sometimes it's easy to suss out and handle, and other times it's really not. So I'd love to know from you guys, have you experienced generational tension in your work environments, and what was that like? And then how did you work around that?
So I had an internship a few years ago at a magazine, and on the first day of work, I went in to speak with the editorial team to introduce myself with the editor-in-chief, and I was going through everything that I had done before. I'd started a nonprofit, and I added that I was 19 years old, and he pulls me aside afterwards, and he says, never say your age unless someone asks you. Like, that's going to be seen as a weakness. And that same attitude was perpetuated over the course of my internship at this firm. And I felt in general that I was paid less than the other writers. Well, I knew for sure that I was paid less, and I couldn't tell if it was because I was young or because I was a woman or a mixture of the two. But the generational tension was so much that I ultimately left, and it was, a bad experience.
So my background's in product management, and a big thing in product management is validating your ideas, supporting it with customer validation, technical validation, that sort of thing. And so I think of that a lot as when we support our ideas or we bring up inside of an organization. And so one example I can give is I was working with our head of BD at the time, and I was basically telling him how to present the product from validation that we've done. And his response to me is, Jonathan, I've been doing this longer than you've been alive. And, I had to take a step back because my blood started to boil a little bit. And I was like, okay, wait a second, let me kind of reevaluate this. And then that's when I just had to phrase it. I was like, it doesn't matter how long you've been doing this. You might be doing it right way, you might be doing it the wrong way. These are actually processes in place that people follow to then create the solutions needed. So this is why we need to do it. And, he got the point after that. But That's just kind of interesting.
Yeah, I guess I have a similar story. I mean, one of the things that I do here at Microsoft as sort of a side hustle is I lead the Women at Microsoft group, and I was invited to do this by the then president about a year into being at Microsoft. And I remember there were a few people who sort of questioned my qualifications for that opportunity, as if I just sort of woke up that day and decided that I wanted to lead the group. I mean, there were a lot of things that I had sort of set the foundation in my previous lives, I guess, to make it a natural thing and step for me to do when I came to Microsoft. But I mean, I guess in those situations, obviously it hurts. It hurts when, you know, people are sort of questioning your qualifications or your background or whatever. But I've just sort of learned to not listen to all of that noise. I mean, I have enough faith in myself that there's a reason why I've earned the opportunities that I have and why I have a seat at the table where I do. And I guess, you know, in the words of Taylor Swift, haters gonna hate. You just gotta shake it off and move on.
We couldn't get throughout the day without one Taylor Swift quote. Thank you. How appropriate. Patty, what about you? What's your take on that?
You know, I was thinking about it. I think given my stature at the company and the fact that I was always advocating for people, I think people were really nice to me. But my kids patronize me tremendously about technology. It annoys me to no end. You know, I know a lot, but they treat me like I'm some sort of an idiot. And maybe people would have done that at work if I didn't have my title.
So that's a good segue to this question, which is, what are some of the current generational stereotypes that you bump up against often that you wish we could just dispel? Patty, you want to take that one?
You know, this is something that I've actually shared with my daughter, who's 23, because we're kind of experiencing the same one right now. Now that I'm no longer a working person, I'm retired, which comes with a whole set of baggage. It's like you died and your brain shriveled up from the moment you walked out of your job. And but people, you know, will not, especially people who don't know that I had a meaningful career before, will treat me like I'm some sort of an idiot. And it is insulting. And the same is true for her as a young person. It's very hard for her to get the traction of dignity and respect for her, what I consider very brilliant and insightful ideas. She feels them poo-pooing her because of her age. And actually, in her particular job, she went to school there. And so she goes, they all see me as a, you know, sixth grader or a student. And it's very hard for her to be taken seriously. So we really identify with the similar kind of dismissal.
Isn't that interesting?
Yeah, it's difficult because, you know, we shouldn't fall into focusing on generalizations or stereotypes or so forth. But unfortunately, as humans, we naturally can do that sometimes. And so, you know, I think this misconception that millennials are lazy or that baby boomers, you know, you're out to pasture or whatever, it's more of, it has nothing to do with the age group. It has to do with the individual. So I've hired plenty of millennials that were incredibly lazy, that were very bad employees and that did need to be fired right away. And I've also hired millennials that have been awesome, some of the best employees I've ever had, right? So it's a work ethic thing, and has nothing to do with the age. It has everything to do with, you know, the experiences that they bring, what they've learned, you know, the tasks that you're giving them and the empowerment that you're giving them to be successful, regardless of the age, and how they come up to the occasion. Like, that's the measure of whether or not they should be an employee, nothing to do, or a member of the team, nothing to do with the age.
I totally agree. In 2016, I interviewed more than 300 millennial women across the US about how sexism and ageism and racism impacts their upward mobility in their careers. I wanted to know, you know, beyond the data, there's all these amazing reports every year by Deloitte and PwC and McKinsey and everyone on like the state of millennials around the world, right? And they're all amazing, but I wanted to know, beyond the numbers, what is the story? Like, what is really happening? What is the terrain really like for my peers? Because I knew what was going on with me and what was kind of happening in the entertainment business, but I didn't have a lot of perspective on what was happening in other markets and other industries. And it's interesting, I collected my own data, and almost 80% of the women I interviewed said that the perception, and it's the two words you just used, the perception that they were lazy and entitled had been thrown at them constantly, and that it was one of their biggest hurdles for going in and navigating a negotiation for a better salary or a promotion or even a new opportunity. And so for me, that's the thing that I would love to, I'd love to get rid of all those generational stereotypes, but they're out there and they're perpetuated too by all the articles that we read. I write for Forbes, and I try very hard to make sure I'm not writing clickbait articles. But when other media sources approach me, they're like, "Hey, can you write? We have this really nasty article about millennials, and we want you to write a really hard-biting rebuttal." And I always say, "Thank you so much, but no," because I don't want to be a part of perpetuating that. So I find that to be kind of a challenge. I want to know. We've talked a lot today about championship and mentorship, and we've touched a little bit about mentorship here, but I want to know, has championship or mentorship played a big role in your trajectory or the choices that you've made or the opportunities that you've had, and what did that look like? What does a real champion look like to you?
Yeah, I mean, I would say that I've definitely been influenced by a lot of mentors and sponsors, which we learned the difference this morning. But also, I have just sort of a set of board of advisors. So, surrounding yourself with a variety of different people who add different lenses and perspectives to your life. I would say, I mean, every opportunity that I've ever had in the working world was thanks to the support of somebody else, whether it was a mentor or a sponsor. Every single job that I've landed was due to somebody else making an introduction for me. And I think, I've been fortunate enough, I guess, to find different leaders who have been willing to take a chance on somebody who's younger and who offers a unique and a fresh perspective. And I think it's really important to sort of cultivate those relationships because, being at a big company like Microsoft, if I were to just sort of go onto the portal and apply for a job, it's really difficult when you don't have that much experience. And so it's helpful to just sort of have people that you're surrounded with who are champions for you, who are opening up some of those doors and opportunities.
What about you, Haley?
Yeah, one of my mentors is a professor at Brown, and next year is actually going to be her 40th reunion. So she's quite a bit older than me, but she's my go-to for everything. And it's great to have someone to be able to bounce ideas off of, and she doesn't necessarily help me in my career per se, but very much with my work, with my books. But I also wanted to nod to Christy Johnson, who I interviewed her for my book, and she's become a very dear mentor in my life, who I go to for advice or just, for the little things. And then also just conversations that sometimes you have with women who, recently I talked with one, I was asking for advice on how to publicize my book, just on one quick conversation. And she connected me with like 5 people who could write articles about it. And I thought that was amazing just to speak with someone one time. It doesn't have to be a mentor that you continually go back to. It can be a one-time champion thing.
Right. I mean, the power of the loose connection too is amazing, right? So people just paying it forward and pulling back and lifting others up with them, I think is also really important.
Yeah, that's actually something I want to touch on because for me, I've never really felt like I've had a mentor. Like I've never said like, hey, we have a mentor-mentee relationship, but it kind of like that one-off, like, hey, like let's go grab coffee or let's do something. Or, but the one thing I kind of want to encourage everybody to do is to have mentors that they might not even know that they're your mentor. And so what I mean by that is just like observing people from afar, like either people that you work with. If you really admire your boss or a coworker or so forth, you don't even have to call them your mentor. You can just hang out and talk or go out about coffee, or maybe it's an executive that you're never going to see, but just really understanding what they're looking at and how they're thinking of the world. Or, a famous entrepreneur or a famous artist or whatever it is that you're trying to do in your life is observing them from afar and almost treating them as your mentor, right? So, I always joke around that if Jeff Bezos was willing to let me pay him to be my mentor, or even just to like watch him and just observe him, not in a creepy way, but just to really see, because I'm just super fascinated by the way he thinks and the way and other people like that. So those are people that if anytime there's a YouTube video of him speaking, or other entrepreneurial leaders that I admire, there's videos of him speaking, I'm thinking of it as I'm getting my mentorship right there.
It's a really great point. Patty?
You actually just made me think there's so much natural mentorship, at least done by the men in my early career. I had totally forgotten until you talked about Jeff Bezos. I remember Andy Grove years ago saying, hey, I got this new guy who's coming in. He wants to learn about how you organize your environment, how you use MBOs, and because we're hyper organized and measured. It was Jeff Bezos. And we came and we're sitting around this table with Andy Grove, and we kind of got in trouble because we were the young kids then, and we were saying, God, everybody takes us really seriously, but when did that happen in our life? But I also remember a different CEO of Intel literally tapping me on the shoulder and saying, just in a hallway conversation, you're going to work for me someday. And I took that so to heart, meaning we all had the obligation to do that shoulder tap. And when the women VPs at Intel got together, we identified that we had all been treated that way and that we needed to increase it, whether it's formal or informal. We needed to really increase that energy by tapping others, or by, if you need a formal program, by doing a formal program so that you can spread that wealth out as much as possible.
Patty, for leaders who are interested in building a program like that, really quickly, where should they start?
I went to my HR person.
You did.
She was wonderful. And this was before Catalyst had done its research and everything.
Mm-hmm.
We searched for a name and called it sponsorship. But we needed an advisor to our group. And I went to the HR person. I said, we want to figure out how to make an impact on the company. And she said, well, tell me some of the things that you've talked about. And we had all talked about the fact that we had been helped along always by a guy. There was no women in the leadership ranks before us, but who had even just very briefly made it very clear that we had a future there and that they cared about our future. So we asked her to do something to spread that wealth.
I love that. What has each of you hopeful for the future when you think about not only the future of work, but about the future of the people coming up behind us? What has you feeling positive?
Days like these and summits like these. Yeah, having conversations, that's the only way you're going to get it done. Just like on the panel, 2 panels ago, somebody said that, you don't know unless you talk about it and you have the hard conversations. So it's great to be a part of the conversation here. Yeah.
Yeah, I would also say days like today, but I think what makes me hopeful is just sort of looking at some of the youth today. We were talking a little bit about that earlier, but I hate to steal your thunder, but you'd mentioned kind of the Parkland High School students. And just the fact that people are having these conversations, and people who are younger than us are already so brave. And it's just really interesting because if you look at the generation before us, like my mom as an example, she grew up as a single mom, immigrant. She had very different upbringing than me. And to think about, just sort of the experiences that I've had and the things that I haven't had to deal with that she had to, I know that my kids are going to be in an even better place one day. And so it's just really exciting. It makes me really hopeful about the future. And also the fact that in a few years, millennials aren't going to be the minority anymore. I guess that's pretty exciting too.
Absolutely. Anyone else want to share what has them hopeful?
I'm very hopeful about the bravery of the coming generations. I see that everywhere. I see much more bravery than I did in the generation that came immediately after I did. And one of the things I was thinking about when you guys were talking about millennials, I honestly, and this did make me feel a bit like a fogey. I didn't know there was a stereotype about millennials being lazy, but you know what? I stopped reading that generational literature a long time ago because it's people just getting paid to make stuff up about groups of people whose ages then change and then they're in the next generation. So
thanks, Patty. That's wonderful. Well, thank you guys so much today. I guess if there's any takeaway from this panel that I'd want for you to jot down in your notebook is that, despite anyone's age, everybody has something to offer. And something I hear on the road all the time is that people of every generation just want to be able to contribute and share and are happy to give of themselves really to anyone who's in need. And so I just encourage you, whether it's mentoring someone older than you or younger than you or peer mentoring someone across the table from you, take time to invest in one another and know that your contribution and your voice is really valuable, and it might just be what someone else needs at that juncture in their life. So don't shy away from speaking up and offering that. Thank you guys so much for being here with us today, and let's keep going with the show.